Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. I believe I just got the word that Congressman Trent Franks is with us, correct?
Yes.
Amen. Well, is that you, Congressman Franks?
That's me, sir. How are you?
Yes, sir. I am doing wonderful. Listen, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to do this. We know you've got a lot to do, and we're just honored that you would give us some of your time. So, sir, let me just tell you, I'm going to put you right up. Rather than giving a long introduction, you can talk a little bit about your own background, but please take 7 to 10 minutes to share with us. I know we'd ask you to talk a little bit about Christian persecution in the Middle East and around the world. Anything else that you think is really important to talk about right now? And then if you could take a few minutes for questions, we would just appreciate that. So, folks, Congressman Trent Franks.
Well, thank you, Bishop Jackson. And first, let me just say to you, it is a sincere honor to be on this program with you and this conference call. I know that it's kind of the protocol in the Washington, D.C. to try to slap everyone on the back, but let me just say to you, I have the most profound respect and affection for you as an individual, as a brother in the Lord, as someone who's committed to the great American ideals that are the only hope for this country. And I just can't express to you how honored I am and how much I hope that the callers that are involved here understand the significance of your leadership and the importance of who you are as an individual, and how those of us in Washington, D.C. See you, how we recognize you. The voice that you can speak into the Congress is probably something they don't fully understand. I mean, but Bishop Jackson has an influence just simply because of who he is. He personifies, in my judgment, everything that is important to this country and to humanity at large. And I know those are big words, and I don't express those kinds of sentiments to everyone. But I really truly believe that you all have a profoundly effective leader, and I pray you pray for him and you work with him every way you can. Now, with that, let me shut up and quit embarrassing him here. There is no question that those who recognize the dangers of persecution in general, that religious freedom diminishment in the world is very significant. It's happening all over the world right now. I have to say to you, in Iraq, this is sort of the Garden of Eden, at one point. In Iraq, the Christian persecution there is profound. Anytime, when you're seeing in Mosul, there was a time there where there was no mass, and that for the first time in centuries, when the tomb of Jonah is destroyed, and where Christians are crucified and raped and killed, it is a horrifying situation. And this group, there are many terms that they call it: ISIS, ISIL, the Islamic State, and there's a big debate now about what we should even call these monsters. But the bottom line is that they have a seething hatred towards Christians, and there's greater Christian persecution there than I have seen in a long time. And I have the privilege of chairing the Religious Freedom Caucus in the Congress. And I don't have to tell all of you, I don't have to tell Bishop Jackson that when we speak of freedom, that the very cornerstone of freedom is religious freedom. If we protect people's right to believe and worship as they choose, and to express their faith, and to have religious freedom, if they have that, those things lead to other kinds of freedoms. One of the great statesmen many years ago said, out of deep, dark bondage, and I'm paraphrasing now, comes a deep faith, and faith leads to courage. And that's true. Nothing gives us more courage than our faith. Faith leads to courage, and courage leads ultimately to freedom. And freedom leads to abundance. And abundance leads to apathy. And apathy leads to dependence. And dependence leads back to bondage. And we're seeing that scenario play out in America right now. So religious freedom is such a foundation. And when it's desecrated, as it's being desecrated in Iraq and Syria and other places in the world right now, if the Christians in America don't respond to that, not only does it fail the test of our time, not only are we in my judgment, failing our faith in our Savior. But we are inviting the desecration that these monsters are willing to perpetrate against Christians into our own country. And I think, unfortunately, that it's a matter of time before we see that manifest in our own country. And I hope and pray that we do what we can while we can. In sometime around July of 2007, President George Bush, he stood before the American people, and he warned us. He said, if we withdraw our commanders, or withdraw from Iraq before our commanders tell us we're ready, we would be surrendering the future of Iraq to the terrorists. And again, I'm paraphrasing, but he said it'd be like we'd be risking mass killings on a horrific scale. Now, that's a quote, mass killings on a horrific scale, which is exactly what's happened. I mean, this is close to prophecy as it gets. And my concern is not only did we see this happen in Iraq, but we're now potentially seeing no status as forces agreement going out of Afghanistan. And that means that we could be making the same mistake there. So the bottom line is we have to not only, as Christians, work for religious freedom and speak up for that in the ways that we can and try to bring the religious perspective to the table. But I'm going to just tell you flatly, and I hope you'll grant me diplomatic immunity here, Bishop. We're going to have, as Christians, we're going to have to be wise in our political involvement, because there's only two ways we can make policy in this country, in this republic, and that is by electing the right people, or the second possibility is trying to get the wrong people to do the right things. And I'm convinced right now that's one of our great challenges in Iraq. That's one of our great challenges with religious freedom in the world, that it is not the priority of this administration that it so desperately needs to be. And as Christians, we're going to have to not only stand up and be the called servants of God that we should be, but we also should fulfill our responsibilities in the political arena to do the right thing. And I'm not not campaigning here. I'm just suggesting that we need to recognize that who we elect does matter. And right now, we've taken 6 years to respond to ISIS, and they're now rampaging their way across the Middle East. I think that we can slow them down, but unless we have a commitment to eradicate and destroy them, and, people wonder, it's my last thought here, and then I'll throw it open for questions, Bishop, but unless we recognize that, the Christian's response is to turn the cheek for ourselves. But when we have a monstrous organization that is coming in and raping and beheading and killing and crucifying, in some cases, innocent people, our response to that, while we might pray that God somehow changes the hearts of the people involved, and I hope he does, but our response to that as an American people needs to hunt them down and do what's necessary to make sure that they can't continue. And so I, with that, pray that God would give us wisdom, and that only His wisdom is capable of dealing with this. And we need to somehow be heard, because the politics right now is of profound significance in what happens. And I'll stop right there, sir.
Thank you very much, Congressman. Folks, to ask a question or make a brief comment, if you want to make a comment, please keep it brief and get to a question. Press *6, and we will take you in the same order in which you get into queue, *6. Congressman, let me open up with the first question, and that is this. Do you think that Christians in America understand the profound threat to Christianity in general, but to our Christian foundations in this country? I mean, I was reflecting with a friend earlier that this is the first president who stood up in a foreign country and said, we are not a Christian nation. We are not, explicitly, we are not a Christian nation if we ever were. And what is the level of threat as you see it compared to where Christians are in terms of perceiving that threat, particularly, of course, abroad, as you mentioned, but also just here at home with this drumbeat of atheism that attacks everything. Get the cross down. Don't show a Bible. Don't wear a cross. Don't say God bless you. It just seems like every day we're hearing some new effort to try to shut Christians up and shut us down. So do you think Christians understand what's going on?
Well, the answer, I think, is no, and it's very hard for me to articulate the context of your question any better than you already have. I mean, the litany that you listed there is so right, dead on. And my concern is that we forget historically. I think this president almost wants us to take a vacation from history. But, Bishop, if we look historically, the political leaders had a profound impact on the religious communities. I don't have to go back to probably the days of Adolf Hitler, but the bottom line is there was a time when the Nazi Party was just a bunch of idiots riding bicycles across France in their brown shirts, and they had a horrific evil intent, but they had no capacity to do anybody any harm. But that philosophy that they had germinated in the sort of the intelligentsia of Germany, and it grew. And my God, we had 50 million people killed as a result. Ultimately, 6 million Jews and 50 million people died in that horrifying tragedy. And we thought, well, how could that ever happen? And yet today, in the Islamic State, in ISIS, we have a group that is literally as evil as the Nazis were, if not more. And they have no regard to their own lives. They are more intent than anything I've ever seen. And if somehow this ideology that they're putting forward begins to take root in the whole of an Islamic world of 1.3 billion people, the threat that represents to Christianity and to the world is almost impossible for me to articulate. But as you said, and as you said so wisely, and to put it in a kind of an example, that it's always the water on the inside of the ship that sinks it. And our greatest danger to religious freedom, I believe, is within our own country, where we're doing exactly as you said. We're saying, take those crosses down. I used to say that the secular left would never quit until they said that we needed to start taking down the Stars of David and the crosses of Calvary out of the tombstones out in Arlington National Cemetery. And people thought that was an outrageous statement. But just in the last 2 weeks, there's a group now that wants us to do that. So, yes, it's the water on the inside of the ship that sinks it. God help us to be salt and light while there's still time, because our faith is at risk. And if our faith is in this country destroyed, I believe that the very foundation of the nation is destroyed, and America will be remembered rather than recognized in the present.
Okay, Martin, let's go to any callers that we have, any questions that we have.
Yes,
folks, press star 6 to get in queue.
Yes, there's caller ending in number 7419. Caller 7419, go ahead.
Thank you very much. This is Suzanne out in Shenandoah County, Virginia.
Hey, Suzanne.
Hi, EW. It's nice to be on. Thank you. Congressman, I have just finished reading Rabbi Jonathan Cahn's second book that's in it, that is a follow-up to the book The Harbingers, and I know millions of Americans have read it. I am very much afraid that 2015, which it starts on September 25th, we will have what's called a Shemitah, and it's a year of calamity and falling down. And this has been going on every 7 years now for a couple of thousand years. So this is not something new. But what happens is God is trying to give us clues and harbingers as to what will happen to us if we don't bring him back into our lives. And I'm just wondering, the grid would be such a calamity to us. We've already had 9/11. That obviously didn't do the job. What will we do if the grid gets attacked? How will we cope as a country?
Well, you present some very compelling information and compelling questions as well. I guess there's two things I would say in terms of what warnings that we have. We've been warned over the last several thousand years as a people, different times, and when we fail to heed God's warning, then there was many times a great calamity, just as you said. And I guess all we can do as mortal human beings is pray that God would give us the wisdom to know what to do. And then we also have to say, okay, we're not destined as a people that terrible tragedy is going to happen no matter what we do. No, we're tied to God completely, and He said, "Occupy till I come." And I believe that if we put our faith in Him and continue to do what we can, that there's always hope, even though the history bears out some great patterns and tragedies. So I want to start there. But related to the grid, as you know, I have the two bills. I'm assuming you know because you asked me the question. I have the two bills that are designed to protect our national grid against electromagnetic pulse attack. And I can't give you a primer on everything. I will just tell you that there are four major forces that we're able in physics to measure in the universe, and it's gravity, weak forces, nuclear strong forces, and electromagnetic force. Electromagnetic force is the most powerful of the four. And if it should overwhelm our grid by means of either a man-made electromagnetic pulse or a natural electromagnetic pulse from the sun, it could absolutely devastate our civilization. And it is something that I am afraid now that the enemy knows about. We know they know about it. And so we're doing everything that we can to try to harden the grid so that it's impervious to an enemy attack. And right now, I'm very concerned. I think it might be our number one short-term national security threat, and especially with a group like the Islamic State in the world that would use whatever means they could to hurt us. So it's a very, very important question. Pray for us that we do the right thing. One of the bills could come up in committee here within the next 45 days. So that's pretty important. Could come up right away.
Excellent. We need to be monitoring. Go right ahead, Martin.
Yes, caller number 022. 0222. Go right ahead.
Hello, I'm Sean McCarty, and I was just calling to ask you what some of us are more aware than others of the threats that are out there. How can we best encourage our friends and family and other Christians to find out more about it? How can we educate our Christian brothers and sisters?
Well, I think that's a good question. First of all, it's so important whenever you're talking to a politician, remember that this politician has my foundational commitment is to Christ, not to the Republican Party. I'm a Republican. I know why I'm a Republican, but let me always say that every Christian should always recognize that our only hope is God Almighty. That's our hope. We don't get our rights from the government or from man. We get our rights from the one who raised the mountains and lifted the stars, And so that's first what we need to do. But then we need to recognize that He has called us here in this life to be responsible. He's always going to be sovereign, but He's called us to be responsible. And I don't understand all I know about that. But that responsibility includes that when you're living in America, in the greatest republic in the history of humanity, and where you have such an opportunity to learn and to be wise in your involvement in that area, that you have a responsibility to God to do that. And I think what we have to help Christians understand somehow is that while our great faith and our only true faith is in God, we have a responsibility to God to be good citizens and especially to exercise our influence in this republic that is used of Him to see the gospel of outreach go all over the world. So we have to help them understand that they have a responsibility to God to be politically wise and informed and motivated. I know that sounds pretty direct. Here I am saying that God is our hope, but that we have a responsibility to Him to be politically involved. But I believe both are true.
All right, excellent. Next caller.
Yes, caller number 1216. Go right ahead.
Yes, hi, Congressman. This is Daniel Bradshaw. I had a question for you. Going back to ISIS here, the Islamic threat. My understanding is the president is meeting with some of the leadership in Congress today, and he, of course, will be making his laying out his plan tomorrow with dealing with the ISIS threat. What are your thoughts about what if you were in the White House, I think we'd be a lot better off. But if you were in the White House, you were president, what kind of plan would you say we need to lay out? What would the plan you would be to lay out in dealing with the ISIS threat?
Well, yeah. First, let me just say to you, yes, the president is talking with congressional leaders today. We just got out of a HASC hearing, or a House Armed Services Committee hearing, where I happen to be a senior member there, with all the classified briefings that I just walked out of there to come to this call. And I can only say this to you, since I can't touch on any classified material. I can just say to you that what you're reading in the paper about ISIS is true. They are monsters of the first magnitude, and we cannot just say that we intend to degrade them or contain them. They have to be confronted and destroyed, and I believe that's a Christian perspective. I want you to understand that I know that there are those that say, well, no, we just have to stand by. When we get attacked personally as Christians, we can turn the cheek, we can do everything that we can to show the love of Christ, and I believe in that with all my heart, and I will do that personally. But if someone touches my children or touches somebody that is defenseless, I'm going to be there to defend them with my life if necessary. And that is the call of government, is to defend the lives of its citizens. And right now, the only way that we can truly defend the lives of our citizens from this monstrous group with the intent and the commitment that we have is to confront and destroy them. And I'm not sure that this White House is of that mind, but I believe that it's fine to do the airstrikes and to degrade them and to try to arm the Peshmerga and to try to do everything we can to support what is a rather moderately feeble effort on the ground. But at some point, we're going to have to make sure that ISIS is destroyed, and that may mean doing exactly what George Bush said would have to happen. He said that American troops would then have to return at some time later to confront an enemy that's even more dangerous than the one we were fighting then. And I'm afraid that looks like what is going to have to take place. And this administration has said, well, this will happen probably after we're out of office. So that may be true, but right now we have to try to convince this administration to confront these people in a very serious way, because otherwise we're going to face some tragedy in our own country, and then the people will certainly be motivated to fight them.
And Congressman, it's important to add that we wouldn't be facing this if this administration had taken seriously the intelligence reports that they were already getting about the rise of ISIS, and this president had taken the time to negotiate a proper status of forces agreement that would have left enough troops in there, as we have in other places around the world, to protect all that we spent American lives and treasure for to have. So here we are back at it again because of his failed leadership.
Bishop Jackson, I want you to know, I think we ought to have you on the Armed Services Committee, because that is exactly right. There will be I promise you, in this call, there will be no more insightful statement than the one that you just made. That's exactly what's happened. Not only was the Status of Forces Agreement something that would have prevented them from ever coming into Iraq. I mean, just a couple of F-35s could have stopped them from coming into Iraq in the early days. But also, as you say, if we understood who these people were, and we've had this information, this administration literally had access to their annual reports. ISIS puts out annual reports to their fundraising, or to those who fund them, and it's almost like a corporate annual report to the stockholders. Now, this is really horrifying to hear me say this, but they list the number of people they've killed, they list the number of bombings they've made, they list all of these things that are acts of terror and acts of crimes against humanity, and they do that to show how great a job they're doing and why their funding should continue. And this administration knew about that for at least 2, maybe 3 years, and again, were caught completely unaware, at least ostensibly. So your point is iron, and I don't know how to. I can only comment on it because I listen to me, folks. I said it at the beginning of the call. You listen to Bishop Jackson, because this man is called of God to speak to these things, not just this issue. Everything I've ever heard him speak on he's had a prophetic insight, and he's got the mind and heart of God. And so you listen to him, and I don't think I've said that in years about anybody.
Well, thank you, Congressman. Let's go to one more question, Martin.
Yes, this is the last caller. Caller number 6531. Go right ahead.
Hello, this is Erin Anderson. I apologize. I have come late to the phone call, so I don't know if you've already discovered this issue or not. But part of my family is from the Arizona-Mexican border, and I'd like to know what is you have heard regarding ISIS potentially coming through Mexico into the U.S., and also a connection to that they also might try to target our grid, especially in Arizona.
Yeah, well, it is true that we know that ISIS is present in Ciudad Juarez, or they were within the last few weeks. And so there's no question that they have designs on trying to come into Arizona. And when the comment that I've made is if unaccompanied minors can cross the border, then certainly trained terrorists probably can too. And it is something that is real. The whole immigration issue sometimes is a difficult issue because we all have a humanity that we know that people that are trying to come here for good purposes, probably we'd want to do the same thing too. But we have a responsibility to protect our border that is especially important in light of the national security nexus that is present right now. And I will tell you that I think that one of the things that those who suggest open borders are a good idea, if they just realize what will happen to that whole debate if some terrorist comes across our border and does some dirty bomb or some EMP attack or whatever it might be, yes, it's a very serious thing, or some attack on the grid that's a physical attack rather than an EMP attack. There's no question that we are facing a very real enemy. And the bottom line, and I guess this would probably be my closing thought, Bishop, there's two components to every threat, and that is intent and capacity. This enemy of ISIS has as insidious and evil an intent as any group I've ever seen. And we absolutely must prevent them from having the capacity to do us harm, or they will proceed. And I pray that somehow we can all pray and speak to this issue so that it somehow emanates into the White House what we're really dealing with here. And I believe calls like this are part of that, and I believe leaders like Bishop Jackson are the kind of hope that I look to. And I just say God bless you all, and thank you for allowing me on this call.
Well, Congressman, thank you for the time. Thank you for the encouraging words. I will remember them the next time I read some nasty blog that says terrible things about me. So I really appreciate the encouragement.
All right, sir. God bless you in every way.
God bless you too. All right. Bye-bye now. Both Congressman Trent Franks. And, look, I think he basically put it out there and told us just like it is. I'll tell you something, folks. I am angry enough to sometimes stomp my foot when I think about the fact that we lost nearly 4,500 lives, 4,500 in Iraq, fighting, whether you agree with the war or not. I mean, it's been fought. But to undo everything we did and to end up, now he doesn't want to call it a war, but we are back at war in Iraq. And that was the whole point that Bush was making. So whether you agree with the war, I think all of us now, looking back on it, wonder whether it was the wisest thing to do. Some of us who may have supported it at one point may oppose it. But the point is, we've already spent the treasure and, most importantly, the lives of our people to get that country up on its feet and out of the clutches of a dictator who might well have cooperated at some point did have weapons of mass destruction at one point, and certainly might at some point well have cooperated with terrorist forces, because after all, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So, but here we are right back at it again. It's unthinkable. It's so tragic, and nothing touches my heart more. If you ever look at some of these reports about these men who have gone and spent their blood trying to protect us from these monsters. If you had got a chance to see Brett Baer's report on Benghazi even, and saw how one of these men, he's lost the use of his thumb. During the battle, his whole hand was hanging off, and he's still trying to fight. The trauma that our people go through trying to protect us, and then the little regard that seems to be given them in terms of preserving the hard-fought progress that they make, and honoring them, not to mention honoring them by giving them the help, the treatment, the employment, whatever it is that they need when they come home. It's just, I tell you, nothing makes me sadder, nothing makes me angrier. Thank God for people like Trent Franks in the Congress who are standing up for what is right, standing up for the Judeo-Christian values of this country. Let's pray for him and leaders like him because, folks, I know it. I have been asked, in fact, I'll just say Martin has said to me, please don't read these blogs and the things that they say about you, because it can be very disconcerting, the nasty stuff they say about us. Or we're haters, we're bigots, we're crazy, the ironic thing is we love the very people who are saying those things. We really do, and we pray for them. Because there's not a hateful bone in our bodies. We care about them. We understand that they're misguided. We're not out to hurt them. We're out to defeat them, to defeat their ideas, but we're not out to hurt them or harm them or do anything bad to them. But I'll tell you what, they're out to do that to us. They're out to do that to us. Folks, you take people like the Robertsons, Duck Dynasty, you would not believe the nasty, threatening stuff that is being thrown at them simply because they pray at the end of their program, because they believe that the Bible is true, because while they don't talk about it a lot, particularly since that first encounter that they had with the press onslaught, they believe that marriage is a union between one man and one woman, and you wouldn't believe the hate stuff that they have to put up with just as a result of just trying to be decent Christians. But that's where we are, and it's sad, but it's true. So you need to pray for people like him. He said a lot of nice things about me. I appreciate that. But you need to pray for people like him, far more on the front lines than I am. So folks, that's here again. That's where we are. We need to be praying and looking for ways of also supporting our Christian brothers and sisters around the world, obviously, because these people are they're dying. It's just not being persecuted or being talked about. They're dying. So this little offensive stuff is said about me compared to what they're going through pales in significance. Obviously, I ought to be ashamed to even mention it in the same breath, frankly. But look, we have something very, very important that we have got to be cognizant of, that we've got to be aware of in the next couple of months. And folks, that is that we have got to get Christians geared up to vote and to vote their values. I'm not endorsing particular candidates, so I'm not violating our 501c3 status, but it is appropriate for us as a Christian organization determined to uphold Judeo-Christian values to say Christians ought to A, get out and vote, and ought to B, vote their Christian values. Because if we don't do that, we're going to lose this country, and we may well, in the process, lose our freedom. Because that's what it's coming down to. So we need to make sure that people are registered to vote in these churches. We need to make sure that they get out and vote. And please tell pastors they don't have to ever be afraid to say that to their congregations, to say you need to be registered, you need to vote, and you need to vote your Christian values. There's nothing the IRS can say about that being wrong or inappropriate or a violation of our 501c3 status. That's part of our First Amendment freedom to express that. And yes, that does mean upholding traditional marriage because it's a biblical principle. It does mean upholding, moral values such as life, protecting the lives of unborn children. That's a Christian value. Frankly, it even involves supporting Israel because that too is a Christian value. That's a biblical mandate for us. And we need to make sure that we encourage people who hold those values to get out there and run for office, that people get out there and support people of that background, that mindset, that commitment, because we need those people. We're going to be launching a petition for First Amendment freedom, for religious and civil rights, and that's going to be coming out soon. So please be aware of that. We're going to ask that churches circulate that in their congregations. It's not going to involve endorsing a candidate. It's not going to involve endorsing a political party. It's just going to be about protecting the religious liberty of believers, of Christians. But look, folks, here's where we're going. And please don't in any way take this as hyperbole, because 25 years ago when this whole gay rights movement started, when I would say, ultimately we're going to have homosexual marriage, people would say, well, that's hyperbole. You're exaggerating. Well, that's exactly where we are. And that and other things as well, because, now polyamorphous, up to polyamorous, that is, relationships are now being sold as part of the whole marriage package too. That why does it have to be two people? Why can't it be three? And God knows, only God knows where it goes from here. But believe me, it will continue to get worse. But here's the practical thing that you need to tell your pastors and tell people in churches. Because the church must do business with the government. You say, well, how does it do business with the government? Well, every time a pastor marries somebody, he's got to get a marriage license from that city, and you sign off on that marriage license as a representative of your particular faith. Well, what happens when marriage between people of the same sex becomes a protected 14th Amendment constitutional right, which is exactly where we're going, and now you become a discriminator. Your church becomes a discriminator. Well, what would happen if a business, we've seen what happened to private businesses, a bakery, a photography shop, a florist shop, because they say, hey, you can come in my shop, I'll sell you a cake, I'll sell you flowers, I'll do photograph your graduation, your family reunion, but I can't participate in same-sex unions. I just won't do that. That's against my faith. What happens? They've been sued, they've been fined, they've been persecuted, they've been run out of business. So what happens when a church says, well, we will not rent our building for a same-sex wedding? We won't do it. When they say, well, look, I will not perform those ceremonies, and yet you have to get a license from the city. What happens when you go then to get a permit to build an extension on your building, and you say, well, no, I will not hire people in same-sex relationships to work in our school. That's against our faith. Well, what does the city then have the right to say? Well, then you cannot have a permit to build an extension on your building in our city because we believe that you are a discriminator. You are a bigot. You are a hater. Your church is filled with bigots and haters, and we will not participate in expanding your influence in our city. I mean, you see where this has to ultimately go if it continues down this road? And it's only going to be churches rising up, standing up for our rights, voting for people who are going to help protect those rights. It's not about hating homosexuals or hating gays or lesbians or transgenders or people who are questioning whatever category you put them in. It's not about hating them. It's about loving God and about seeking to be true to the values that we believe are important to our faith and, frankly, important to our country, because the family is the foundational institution of our country. So please stand by for that petition. It's coming to your church, we trust. And we're going to be working particularly to reach out to ministers, by the way, black ministers in particular, because they are profoundly concerned, as all ministers ought to be, about these kinds of impacts on their churches and, on their parishioners. And we all should. So for the next 2 months, we got to be focused on making sure that the people who go to Congress and the people who go to the United States Senate are going to stand up for those rights, are going to stand up for our First Amendment freedom, our religious civil rights and religious liberties. Because if we lose those, frankly, folks, we've lost what makes America the most unique country in the world, that we have the right to think as we believe, to think as we wish, to believe as we wish, to speak as we wish, without anybody telling us you can't do that because that doesn't suit our definition of what is politically correct and acceptable. So, folks, the emergency continues. day by day, it continues to unfold, and we cannot be anything less than supremely diligent about all of this. By the way, also glad that Congressman Trent Franks brought up electromagnetic pulse. I have some friends who have been helping to educate me on that issue, and believe me, it is an issue of profound importance to our country. So glad that he's got the vision to be on top of that issue. Need to find out more about the legislation that he's proposed to deal with it, and hope that others will begin to understand that where there is no vision, the people perish. If you don't begin to address these issues before they are crises, just like with ISIS, then you find yourself forced to deal with them as a crisis. So, folks, thanks again for joining us. We will be back with you again on next Tuesday at noontime. Martin, forgive me for asking you this every time, but do we know yet who our guest is for next Tuesday?
Yeah, just like Congressman Franks, whose schedule is really kind of up in the air. There are a couple of potential guests, but we have not secured them because their schedules are somewhat iffy and not their own. So we've got a couple of guests for next week, important guests, and we encourage you to stay tuned and receive the email and participate next week.
And thank you, Martin. Let me add to that, folks. If you are in a state that is a battleground state where you've got two candidates, one who agrees with our concerns and one who does not, we're interested in having those candidates come on this call. And by the way, the invitation can go out to both, whether it's Democrat, Republican, Independent, Libertarian, whatever. Can go out to all of them. But we want to have those people come on and talk about where they are on these issues in North Carolina, in Arkansas, in Alaska, in these places where there are major campaigns taking place and battles taking place that will ultimately determine the control of the United States Senate. So if you are in touch with those folks, those candidates, please put them in touch with us, or get in touch with us. Get in touch with Martin. We'd love to have them on. In fact, we're going to be reaching out to them because we feel it's important that we know who they are and where they stand leading up to the November 4th election. So that's going to be a focus of what we're going to do from now until November 4th as well. So thank you all so much. Listen, we cannot be defeated if we will not quit. I believe that the United States of America is a providential nation ordained by Almighty God, and that nobody and nothing can destroy this nation or take it away from us if even a remnant of us will refuse to compromise on our convictions, on our Constitution, on our Judeo-Christian values. We will not be defeated if we will not quit. America will remain the land of the free and the home of the brave because of you. God bless you. See you next Tuesday.